Imagine a learning environment where students are actively engaged and excited to learn. This episode explores innovative approaches that transform your private lessons or music classroom into a vibrant learning partnership.
Welcome to Pass the Baton, empowering students in music education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover, and we're excited to be back here, another episode with you.
Yeah.
So, Kathryn, what did you think of today's guest?
Oh my gosh, Merlin was really interesting to talk to and just had so many things that had me nodding and agreeing and getting excited about even private lessons that I don't teach, but like I can take into my classroom, into my music classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like he had a really just succinct way of explaining things, how he worked with the students and how he made it. He called it a partnership between teacher and student. And I appreciated just it seemed very manageable to me. And I like that. I need things that are manageable. But then I could, like you said, I felt like I could also see the transfer between what he was talking about in a one-on-one session to what that might look like if I was working with students in a classroom, in an ensemble, or any of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think he just talked about private teachers, private lessons can sometimes be, a step back of like, we just do what we've been taught for so long. And there is definitely room for a change, in that process and a needed change. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Because while it's worked, there's still some things that are lacking and that could work even better. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's worthwhile. As he was talking, I was thinking about, we often talk about students and the decisions that we make that they could be making, right? We have these conversations about that. And a lot of what Merlin was saying made me think about that. So be sure, if you haven't already, check out the resource that we have about student decision-making. I'll make sure I link it in the show notes below. But just kind of get your mind thinking about like, what are some of these things that I'm doing that maybe a partnership would be even more effective?
And I think he touched on like, it's the control. It's like oh my goodness, I have to give up some control. But I think the resource kind of helps you see different areas of maybe I could give the kids some decision making here. I'm not comfortable with this yet, but it gives you some ideas of where you can look and then where you feel comfortable starting.
Yep, absolutely. So before we get to today's interview, we want to remind you that you can support Pass the Baton and get awesome perks.
Join the coffee club for as little as $2 a month and unlock discounts, free resources, planning parties, and more. Check out the link in the show notes to learn more.
All right. Well, welcome back. We are excited to be joined by another great guest today, Merlin Thompson. Merlin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Theresa, and thanks, Kathryn, as well. This is a great opportunity to share some thoughts with you and to join you on your journey of assisting music teachers. It's fantastic to be here.
Yeah.
And it was like I was saying earlier before we hit record, this was perfect timing because Kathryn and I had been talking about how, we were excited to talk to somebody who's in more of the private lesson space. So, this was just a really, really good timing for all of that to work out.
Yeah. Would you mind going ahead and introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more about your background?
Sure. So my name is Merlin Thompson, and these days I'm calling myself a game changer, which is an interesting designation because it indicates that changing what's going on in the music teaching world is my big priority. To tell you about my background, I'm a music studio one-on-one music teacher, which means I'm one of those people, the many people who are teaching students in one-on-one lessons. They come on a weekly basis. My expertise is in the piano. And if I have to kind of give some highlights about what my teaching style is like, collaboration is huge on my list of priorities. Ownership in terms of student ownership is also big in my list of priorities. Background, 45 years. I've just passed the 45-year teaching benchmark, which means that I've had lots of time to try things out. And for me, that's been especially important because some things it took me 10 years to figure out if it was working. And if it wasn't working, it took me 10 years again to try the next thing to see if that was going to work better or not. Where have I done my work? I've done workshops, master classes, teacher development programs all across Canada, the USA. Last year, I did my first project in China, which was really exciting to hear what Chinese teachers are struggling with. And it's the same thing as we're all struggling with everywhere. I'll add on New Zealand and Australia. And that whole history of teaching in all these different places has really been helpful for me to see what success looks like in different locations. And what does that mean when I get back to teaching my students? What will I do differently? Because I've seen what other teachers have done with their students. And all of this has led me to create an organization I call Teach Music 21C. So I'm the creator and founder of Teach Music 21C. It's a teacher development platform. The 21C is all about 21st century teaching tools. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, that sounds great. Congratulations on 45 years.
Yeah.
It's gone by quickly. I can tell you that.
Yeah. And I think I can relate to you saying you presenting and learning from other people. I feel like that's what Theresa and I do with this podcast. It's like we get to hear all these different ways people empower, but there's so many different ways you do it. And there's so many different ways to experience it. And it's just, you can't help but take back gems from other people and use them in your own world. So
absolutely. Yeah. And when you see some people being successful with areas that I'm still questioning what to do, that's a real bonus for me, because it means that I just take that little gem of an idea and I try it out with my students, and on we go.
Mm-hmm.
So on your website, I did my research beforehand, as any good podcast host does.
Yep.
So I was reading about how you were talking about this musicianship as a lifelong experience for students. And I thought, lifelong. We talk about these lifelong learners a lot. I guess for you, why was that something that, caught your interest? And what does this look like when you're teaching?
Yeah, and it all boils down, I feel very fortunate. I had some really pivotal conversations early on in my teaching career. And one that really stands out was with a dad who was bringing his two children to take music lessons from me. And he came with some history. And the history that he came with was that he had an older sister. And his older sister's children had taken music lessons. And he noticed that after they finished music lessons, his nephews and nieces then never touched the instrument again. It was like they took music lessons during their childhood. As soon as the last lesson was over, or the last exam, or the last concert, they were done. And he said to me, Merlin, I don't want that to happen for my kids. I want this music experience, this music making experience, to be something that they will carry with them for their entire life. And so I looked at him and went, yeah, let's see what we can do. And he had two children. And it's interesting because his name is Ken. I talk to Ken about every 2 or 3 years, because that conversation took place 40 years ago. So I talk to Ken every once in a while. And so I've been able to track what his two children are doing today. And we were successful with his son. So his son continues to engage in music making activities as an adult. His daughter, we did. And so I look back to see what was it that we did. And I realized, we did some things, but overall, that was just the launch pad for me to start thinking about what am I going to do to get this, to sow the seeds for students as music makers. And I'll be really specific about what I mean by music maker. I'm talking about a recreational music maker, or an amateur music maker, or I call it a relational music maker. So you make music with the people that you want to have relationships, or you do have relationships with, or community-based music makers. I'm not talking about professional musicians. And so that whole conversation got started 40 years ago, and has basically been a journey for me, as I mentioned before, 10 years of trying things out to see what would happen. Why lifelong music making, you may ask? Well, because we know that music making is something that grounds us as individuals and as communities. It's not the only thing that does that, but it's something that does that. And if we're taking music lessons, why don't we just get those seeds going that are going to support that? And I think what I really want to get to is wellness and well-being.
That everything you're saying is exactly what I believe as well. And I love that you specify we're not just saying we want them all to become professional musicians.
Exactly.
No, we just want it to be part of their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, oh, go ahead.
Well, it's meant that, and where I'm at today is a much greater success. So I look back in the day, and I'm looking at the legacy of what private music teachers are accomplishing. And they might also say what's going on in the classroom as well. That, every once in a while I'm in a university setting and I'm teaching a pedagogy class, and I ask students, how many do you think in your band will actually keep on playing? And we all admit the numbers are alarming, that most likely it's less than 10% of people who are in those kinds of situations continue recreationally to make music. So what it means for me is today, what activities, what strategies have I got in my studio to sow the seeds? And one of my biggest ones, and I'd love to tell you about it, it's called the Chill Out Concert. So right away you might be thinking, so students are going to come and they're going to play the pieces for the audience to chill out to. But that's not what my Chill Out Concert is. My Chill Out Concert is students playing pieces that they chill out to for themselves. And so you see, for me, even to get that in place, I had to find out, do students even have chill out pieces? Are they even chilling out to music at home? Or is their interpretation of what's going on? Our music lessons is home practice, getting ready for the next lesson, getting ready for the next concert, getting ready for the next exam? Or are those things the anchors that we use to support activities like chilling out at your instrument? So for me, it was a really great adventure to find out. Yeah, I found out about half of my students had chill out pieces. And then I found out that, I was missing a major component, because half of them didn't have chill out pieces and didn't even know that was an option for them.
Yeah. I mean, I immediately love that, because it's like exactly that some kids are like, well, I've never thought about that. And why? And, that's going to be something that they can then use for the rest of their life to I really relate to that music. Why do I relate to that music? I use this music to hype myself up. I use this music to calm down, right? Those are such lifelong lessons, and we don't always ask those questions to our students.
Yeah. So sowing the seeds and taking care of those seeds and having those kinds of conversations with students, because what I understand quite clearly is talking about things on a regular basis is really important. And if you just got it in the back of your mind, I'm hoping these things will happen, well, most likely they stay in the back of your mind, and eventually, you realize, maybe I should actually put action behind all of these hopes and dreams that I've got here.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get the students who don't have, they don't have chill out music, they really only practice whatever you tell them to? How do you help guide them to that? I know I've worked with students before when I'll say, well, what do you like to listen to? I don't know, because they don't know how to. Like, what are some strategies that you use to help students get there?
Theresa, this is such an important thing. And it's so easy for teachers to get discouraged by students who say, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And, I understand that entirely. So my practice now, and I appreciate my 10-year experimenting going on here. So what I've discovered about 10 years ago was that the first lesson is the best place to talk about what kind of music do you like and what are you listening to and what songs do you know. And setting that up in the first lesson is really amazing, because all children come to their first formal music lesson with a music background. My student Luke knows how to sing Happy Birthday, Itsy Bitsy Spider, Jingle Bells, and that was the first three I got off his list. And so right away I realized, if I don't help him to learn to play those pieces within the next month, What am I setting him up to think? I'm setting up him to think that, oh, piano lessons means just doing what Dr. Thompson asked me to do, as opposed to piano lessons are this thing where Luke's got some ideas about things that he wants to, that things that are already there that I've said, oh, that's a seed I want to develop. And what's really fun is that pieces like Itsy Bitsy Spider and Happy Birthday are not in the first book of piano pieces. We consider those pieces, oh, no, they are an octave span. We've got to stay with it. So right away, there's a teacher mindset that also has to change in terms of saying, if the piece is in his head, what's the obstacle? There are no obstacles. Having a piece in your head means I've got the first step to learning in place. So that's what I'm doing with my beginners, and that sets up a trajectory then. But to come to your point, Theresa, how do you introduce this with students that you've been teaching for a number of years and you've never really had this conversation? And when you do, you do get the I don't know answer. I don't know what piece I want to play. I don't know. So that's where I step in with my suggestions. And the few that I've listed are great. Jingle Bells might be another one, but Happy Birthday, definitely. For me, at this point of my teaching, if students don't know how to play Happy Birthday by the end of their first year of piano lessons, why are they taking? What am I doing? What is my goal? So there's that. There is the suggesting of pieces. And then I use the group environment. So I have group lessons once a month. One of the activities that takes place during group lessons is that all of the students will teach their peers how to play a piece of their own choice. So you can see what happens is that they hear other pieces, and sometimes it's a shock. You'll hear, like my student Jasmine, the day she came in and she played Star Wars, the other students looked at her and went, Star Wars? You're a Star Wars person? How does that work? So it's interesting. So there's that. There's the group lesson, teaching each other. The biggest one for me is my communal event, which means I have an annual own choice students concert where all students across my studio only play pieces that they chose to work on. So there, and I'll be clear again. It's not which sonatina from my list of 3 sonatinas did they choose. That's not students' choice. That's teachers. That's still teachers' choice is what that is. So those are 3 things that I do. 1 is get it going with that first lesson. 2 is use the group environment. 3 is use this community so people can see. I have to say, yeah, it's my student Alex, who transferred to me. And when I told him at the first lesson that he could bring any piece that he wanted to play, his face lit up like Christmas was going to be coming next week. It was, and I could just see here was a kid who worked really hard, but only did the things that his teacher was telling him to do, didn't even, nothing else was happening. And he came with a list the next week of pieces that he wanted to learn. And it's continued to this day. He's got a list all the time. And when I ask him, Alex, how do you even get this list? He says, I go on YouTube, I type in fun pieces for boys my age to learn, and this is what comes up. So has he figured out how to get the internet to help him out? Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm struck kind of both times that you were talking about how you've kind of evolved over your years of teaching, that you really always just started with a question. Like with yourself, you started the question of just, how can I help sow the seeds of lifelong learning? And even with the kids, just at starting the first lesson you have with them of like, what do you like to learn, listen to, or what do you, and even if they don't have the answer, like you didn't solve your problem the first time you asked yourself that question, but over time, you're going to, if you just plant the question, there's just so much that happens from just asking the question and trying to move forward, right?
Yeah. And Kathryn, I'll say, I've learned to add on another line. Would you like to tell me about those things next time I see you? Do you want to go home and think for a week? So, I don't know about the two of you, but I'm a very reflective thinker. Mm-hmm. And, I think about my PhD final. So PhD, you just got to show up for your exam and you just got to do what you can do. There's no, I'd like to go away and think for a couple of days and then I'll come back with my really good answers. All my good answers came 3 days later, every single one of them. These answers that I came up on the spot, yeah, they were adequate. So what I learned through that was that with my students, I have a lot of reflective thinkers there too. And putting them on the spot, I'm not intentional about putting them on the spot. I'm just hoping to get some information, but they may not look at it in the same way. They may look at it, nobody's ever asked me that question before. What do I do? I'm the deer in the headlights kind of thing. So just saying, why don't you think about it for a week? Talk about it with your mom and dad. We'll see what we can do to add to the list the next time I see you.
Yeah. I could also see it might take even to the time that they get to be in a communal, the one you said where everyone's together and they learn from each other. I mean, because as a general music teacher myself, I have the power of like other kids in the room. And so then they start to see, oh, well, Theresa listens to that. Oh, I could listen to that. Or but yes, so that adding that extra thing for the kids too sounds like a powerful place for kids to learn from other kids and get their own ideas. That's great.
Yeah. So they're not alone. This, they're in a we all live in a musical world, and this musical community is there. It's just a question of, do we I won't say take advantage of it, but do we contribute? Do we listen? Do we have those people that we're connecting with? Yeah, they're all there. They're just waiting. If we haven't made that gesture, all we need to do is make the gesture and it will happen.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that we were drawing from when we were looking at your work was this reflective partnership teaching. Can you explain what that is?
All right.
Maybe we've been talking about it.
Yeah, so to talk about reflective partnership teaching, I have to kind of take a step back and give you some background. And I'll give you the background of coming with me to about maybe 15 or 16 years ago. I'm at a workshop. I taught lots of workshops. I like to ask questions at the beginning. This time around, I asked the question to all the students, how do they know when they're playing a piece well? Seems like a good question. These kids have all had lessons for 4 or 5, 6, maybe 7 years. They're in junior high. I think, this is a good question. So the answer I got one by one from these 4 children who were in this masterclass was, I know I'm playing the piece well when my teacher tells me. And I thought, okay, I get what that is. Yeah. Okay. And so I came away from that thinking, here's students who play really well. They've achieved a great level. They all play with a level of excellence, but their ability to think about what they were doing was something that hadn't really been tapped into by their teachers. So that was a little kernel that got me thinking. The next came when a group of music teachers asked me to view their videotapes of them teaching. So these were teachers teaching in their ordinary studio. I watched the videos, got together for feedback, and my biggest feedback for all of them was that I would like to have seen more student-centered teaching. And one by one, they said they thought that's what they were doing. I thought, okay, but what did they think student-centered teaching was? And one of the teachers said it's something like, well, it's like when you have a student, and if that student's interested in hockey, you use all kinds of hockey images to help them out with their study. I said, yeah, that's a really powerful tool. That's not really what student-centered teaching is, though. So those are the 2 things that really got me thinking. And I'm thinking, why are these situations happening? I went back one more step to look at the whole master-apprentice approach. So the master-apprentice approach is what we as music studio teachers and classroom music teachers have inherited from previous generations. And the master-apprentice approach really tells us what's going on. We've got a master who knows a lot, and we've got an apprentice who doesn't know a lot. And the master's job, I'll maybe use the word control is one of the words, to control what the student's learning, but to pass on massive amounts of knowledge and skills. And how do they do that? In a master-apprentice approach, they do it by telling the student what to do. So all of those things kind of compiled for me, and I went, okay, master-apprentice approach, students not knowing if they play the piece well, teachers thinking student-centered teaching was such and such, master-apprentice, at a certain point became redefined as teacher-directed. And when people like Carl Rogers came forth in the 1960s and suggested human-centered, there was a certain amount of shifting that took place at that time. Martin Seligman came out in the 90s with positive psychology, and another shift took place in terms of what this teacher-directed teaching was by a softening of the language and a more positive language. So I'll speak back 70 years to my childhood. The language on occasion was pretty harsh. And the idea of not following teachers' instructions, well, that wasn't an option. Students like me did what we were told to do. That's all there was to it. 80s and 90s, 2000s came, and there was a softening of all that. Students were still expected to do what teachers told them to do, but teachers used a nicer language to do that. And they started calling it student-centered teaching. So my whole thing was, with all of this information, student-centered teaching doesn't tell you what's going on. Whereas teacher-directed teaching tells you, yep, teachers are directing. Master-apprentice tells you what's going on. Student-centered, we have no idea what's going on. Centered on the student, everybody got softer in their language and all that. So I thought we need a descriptor that actually describes what's going on. And I came up with reflective partnership teaching. The teaching where we understand the partnership. Well, the partnership is between a teacher and a student. That's not to say they're equals, because they're not. The teacher does know more, and the student is coming to the teacher for information and so on. But their relationship is interactive. They are partners. They're both invested in this process. And what are they invested in? They're invested in sharing their reflections with each other. So not just sharing information. Information is not enough. We have to get to the reflective stage. So that's the big background to reflective partnership teaching. To talk about teaching in a different way that's not master and apprentice, it's not teacher directed, it's not just student centered in the sense that we're using a nicer positive language. We're changing the paradigm completely, which is to say, instead of the one-way communication we had before, we've got two-way communication happening. Instead of teachers telling students when they play well, we have teachers and students engaged in a reflective relationship, so both of them know what's going on. Long story, there it is.
But it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just that word partnership, I love that, because and yes, you said it doesn't mean they're 100% equals, but they're working together. The teacher's working with the student's working with the teacher. And I think that's the really important piece that we forget sometimes when we want to just tell our students how to do something. Nope, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. But really, it's a conversation.
Yeah. And our biggest challenge really is that we've had hundreds of years of success with the master-apprentice approach. So if we look at how the levels of excellence that students play today, we would all very easily admit, yeah, students are playing today better than they've ever played in the history of music teaching. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge, it goes back to that where I just touched a bit on the legacy, that, yeah, we've got students playing better than ever, but 90% of them never touch their instrument or sing again after that final lesson. And why is that? Well, it has to do with that chill out concert business. It has to do with that having your own choice of pieces. But it also has to do with the collaborative element of teaching and who owns what's going on. And unless students feel like this journey belongs to them, there's a good chance that they won't take that journey any further when they get the chance.
Yeah. Can you put us in a lesson? I know there's no such thing as a typical lesson, but put us in a lesson, and maybe can you describe some of what this is going to look like?
Yeah, so that's the really amazing thing for me, is that there are 3 definite steps to reflective partnership teaching. So it's not just this whole blank canvas, see what you can do. No, there are 3 definite steps, and they are: gather information, explore current perspectives, and figure out what you're going to do next. So the whole gathering information is just, like with every one of my students, they know the plan. They know what's going to happen. Why? Well, because they've had reflective partnership teaching for a number of years. So I'll just tell you, the first thing I'm asking my students when they come in is, how did your practice turn out? What was the hardest thing you did? What was the easiest thing you did? Bring me up to date on what's going on. And I have to tell you, 2 weeks ago, I got a huge bonus. My student Angie showed up. So 3 years she's been my student. And this week she shows up. She's got all her, we're going to have a lesson. I'm saying, what's the hardest piece? She tells me we work on it for a while. I say, oh, let's go on to this piece. And she turns to me, she says, Dr. Thompson, aren't you going to hear my report? And I'm going, your report. So what have we been doing for 3 years? I've been saying, give me the report on your piece. Give me the report on your piece. Tell me how it's coming along. So on that day, Angie gave me the report. She'd fixed all this. She'd worked on that. She got this done. She was really happy. And for sure, yeah, she gave me the report. So that was for me the whole process of gathering information. And it's really useful to gather it up front in terms of how was your practice last week? What was hardest? What was easiest? And I know for teachers that we come from a history. I mean, I just read on Instagram not very long ago, someone, a teacher, asking a question, what do you do when students have excuses about why they've not practiced for the last week? And I thought, even those words, what do you do when students have excuses for not practicing, tells me a lot about what that teacher thinks students should be doing. And it told me that gathering information isn't part of what they do. In fact, they don't want information. They want students to just come and say, I did everything you told me to do. I'm ready to go with what you've ever asked next. But that, for me, is completely unrealistic. Students are going to come with whatever happened during the week. And we, quite frankly, have the expertise to handle that. So I got the first step there. First step is gather the information. Second step is find out what's going on with the current perspective. So the next thing I asked Angie was, what should I watch for in your piece when you play it now? All right. So 2 to 3 years, got vocabulary now to talk about. She said, well, I'm going to play the shaping perfect on this section, and there's not going to be any speeding up or slowing down in the whole piece. Okay, so I can pay attention to that. She plays the piece. The first thing I say is, so how did things turn out? And she goes, yeah, well, I kind of sped up over here, but I think everything was also okay. And the spots that I said I'd fix, I did fix. I said, yeah, absolutely. So then comes step number 3, which is figuring out what to do next, which can be something that comes from me or it comes from the student, depending on their level of expertise. I might say to Angie, what do you want to do with this piece next? And she might say, I think I just want to play it for fun. Okay, so let's play it for fun for a week and see what happens. The next week, when I say, what do you want to do with this piece? She might say, I think I want to do it for fun. And I might say, that's a really good idea. Why don't you add on seeing if you can play it 2 different ways, my favorite way and your favorite way. So those 3 steps, you could say there's a partnership going on. There's reflection going on in each of those steps. So what are they? Gather the information, get the current perspective, get some feedback following that current perspective, and then figure out what you're going to do next.
Yeah.
I'm taking mental notes for my next piano lesson.
But I also hear so much of pass the baton, we have these, qualities that an empowering music student has. And it's like the kids are asking questions. The kids are voicing their thoughts. The kids are having choice in what they're doing. And so much ownership is on them by you just asking those questions. And then, that just time learning of like, when something comes up, here comes the expert to be able to say, hey, why don't you try this? Or why don't you do this? But it's, the students are driving their learning, which is amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I have to say, it's really exciting. And ultimately, I think what all of us are trying to do is I call it, paint ourselves out of the picture. And I'll go back to those students who only knew how they were playing when the teacher told them. So the teacher was never out of the picture. The teacher would always be there. And what's the chance then of students following up on that when they're on their own? Well, pretty minimal. Yeah. So this whole idea of this reflective partnership teaching, pretty powerful. What's fun for me is, as I've been telling people about it, I've discovered that there are teachers out there who are already doing reflective partnership teaching. And it's just part of who they are. When they walk into a room at a party and they see someone they don't know, they walk right over and it's like, tell me your story. So they want to know what's going on with those people. And then there are other people who, no, when they go to a party, no, they're not doing that. So in the teaching world, there really are teachers who are already in the reflective partnership, I would say, framework, who may not have defined what they're doing as clearly as I am. But my impression is also that there's still a majority of people who are holding on to that master-apprentice approach because it is successful on certain layers. For me, it's not successful on enough layers. And I guess that's where I'm at, where I'm calling myself a game changer, because I'm saying, yeah, excellence is an important layer, but what about reflection? And what about ownership? And what about communication? Those are important layers as well.
Yeah. That's a good thing to mention, because obviously a lot of us got here because we were successful in the master apprentice model, right?
You got it.
So I went through how many years of school and it worked for me. But I think that key is it's not working enough, and it's not working for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and so much of what you're saying, I can also envision in a classroom setting.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So much crossover.
Yeah. The other thing I heard too is just from you sharing your experience as a student and all the way up to now, what, last week looked like, is just the difference in the learner experience, right? Like, be quiet and listen and do what they say, to have a complete partnership in my lesson. It's just so different. And so if I got to choose which one do I want to do? Well, yeah, I want to be the active participant. Right. I want to have a say. I want to have a choice. Yeah.
Yeah. Huge implications. But for a classroom, and I will say, on your podcast series, you have any number of people who have already talked about this collaborative, ownership-based environment. So this is really exciting to see that these seeds are getting planted. I think what I'm bringing to the table at this point is that framework of step 1 is gather information. Step 2 is see what's going on. Step 3 is figure out what you're going to do next. So for me, those are valuable steps.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes it very, very manageable for someone. Yeah. So kind of speaking about being manageable, when we wrote Pass the Baton, one of the things we were really adamant about was having some ideas every chapter, something you can try tomorrow. We're giving you all of this information, but here's tomorrow's step, right? Because we can't just reinvent the wheel overnight. So if, someone's listening right now, they're thinking whether it's for their private students or their music classrooms, what is that nugget that they can try tomorrow to get them on the path?
Yeah, Theresa, thank you so much for just bringing this, because the takeaway has to be, what can I do? And without the what can I do, my talk is just, I heard Merlin Thompson talking. That was all very nice, but don't know what to do next. So it's really important that there's a nugget that people can grab onto. And the nugget that I think is really the most actionable is the notion of sharing ownership. And for me, it is, so I know I've got to lead the way on occasions, but I also want to make sure that I'm following my students' lead just as often as I'm taking the lead. And my advice for classroom teachers is, if you have at any class and you have a warm-up, why not let the student lead the warm-up? Why not change that around? Every day you have a different student lead the warm-up. And, I suggested, because I saw someone do this after I suggested it. And it was interesting. She was a junior high band teacher. She did a warm-up with the first class I saw. I said, why don't you ask a student to do the next warm-up for you? She went, I'm not sure that's a good idea. She said, can I have a student do the warm-up? Student put up their hand, jumped up to the front. She said, I don't do conducting like Miss So-and-so. I do my conducting because I'm in the such and such a band here in Calgary. Our director uses this style. I'm going to use that style for conducting you and doing the warm-up. And she took charge of that group in a way that I was pretty impressed. The aftermath for me was I talked to the teacher and said, so did you know the student was a member of the band that she was talking about? She said, no. And I went, so there's where the gathering information is really important, to know who your students are, to know what musical organizations they belong to know those kinds of things. So that was a great one for me, actionable right away. Get a student leading the warm-up. For music studio teachers, it is a similar kind of thing. So we choose repertoire all the time for students. And I go on Instagram all the time, and somebody's always there saying, can you suggest a great piece for a 9-year-old girl who, whatever. And I always type in, ask the student themselves. That's your best source of resources for that student. So it is. Sure, we're going to take the lead, but we're also going to open up the door for students to bring in that music. And as we talked about this morning, it may require being patient, and it may require more strategies than just asking. It may require that peer environment before that little nugget really takes place. But for sure, opening that door for students to get their own choice in there. It's just so marvelous. And I have to share with you, I had students, and Annalise, I'll mention her, in her graduation recital in late junior high. She wanted something really personal. She went to the music store. She got 2 books. What were the 2 books? Harry Potter movie series, junior renditions and advanced renditions. And she brought them to her lesson. She said, Dr. Thompson, which ones should I choose? I said, you're more than capable of choosing. She went home. She chose the pieces that she wanted to do. When she came back the next week, I asked her, how did you do that? She said, well, the pieces in the advance were really beautiful, but they'll take me way too long to learn. So I chose the junior pieces because I know I can get them done in time for the concert. And I thought, well, there we are. Yeah, she's basically talking about what I do when I get ready for a concert. I have all these hopes and dreams. I try those pieces and I go, no, it's never going to work. It'll take me 5 years to get ready for the concert. This piece, yeah, I can do that piece in 3 months. Yeah, so off we go.
Yeah.
So for actionable type things, teachers in the classroom, I'll say, yeah, the rehearsal, warm up. If you got a warm up exercise, give it to someone in the group. And if you're a private music teacher, just start those conversations about what does students' own choice look like.
Yeah, that's such a valuable thing to think about, because I have so many, band director friends or ensemble director friends that when they talk about or they think about having students choose the music, they say, well, they don't know what they can play. They don't know what's appropriate. Well, you're showing me that the student was able to make that decision. And I imagine it was because you had also those seeds you talked about, right?
For sure.
The student had already been thinking about herself as a musician and those kind of conversations. So when it came to choosing the music, she was able to make a choice. Not to say she couldn't have played the harder things, but
right.
With the parameters in place, that was where she ended up.
Yeah. And I realize also the classroom situation, there are more, what would I say, guidelines. There are more people influencing what's going on in the classroom. Feel so blessed that I teach in this one-on-one entrepreneur environment, because we can explore a lot of things. But within that, I will also say that I met last spring in March at the American String Teachers Association conference, which was held in combination with the Suzuki conference. I sat down one day, somebody walked by. I said, what are you doing? He said, blah, blah, blah. I said, this is what I'm teaching. He said, oh, I use a shared classroom in my philosophy in my classroom as well, where students are bringing pieces that they want to work on. I said, how's that working for you? He said, yeah, it's working great. Keeping in mind that we will always have to figure out, we'll always have to evaluate how did things turn out when we get to the end. Did we get to where we wanted to get? Was it a successful destination? So yeah, here was a guy just out of the middle of nowhere. He's got students' own choice. It's there. He's just working on it.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Merlin. Thank you so much for for sitting down with us and talking to us and sharing, what you've been doing for years and kind of reflecting on your own work. How can people learn more about you and maybe contact you if they have questions?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm the creator and founder of Teach Music 21C, and that's that whole notion of 21st century teaching. So you can find out all about what this organization is all about on the teachmusic21c.com website. We also have podcasts that are up on YouTube as well. You can follow me on LinkedIn. The best thing you could probably do is when you get to the Teach Music 21C website, you'll see there's a sign up for the newsletter. So you can get, it's a weekly quick blurb from Merlin with just a quick visit to Reflective Partnership teaching for the day or some other idea that's come up. So those are really the best ways. The newsletter is probably the best one to get immediate information. And then I'd also encourage people to have a look at our certification program, which consists of 5 one-hour modules. And these are, my whole thing is, if we're not going to do what the master-apprentice teachers are doing, what are we going to do instead? And so the 5 modules are really there so that we've got a clear idea of what are the alternative strategies. Because it's not enough just to say, I'm not going to do what that is. For me, that's not a solution. That's just an awareness. So the 5 modules of the certification program, we offer them at multiple starting points during the year. And that's just a really great way for any teacher to enhance or expand their teacher skill set.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure I have all of those links in the show notes so people can just click.
That would be great.
There they'll be. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. As Kathryn said, this has really been great. And there's so many good things to think about. And as well as, reminders, as you said, some things we've heard guests say, but it was great to hear it from your perspective, especially thinking through that one-on-one lesson model. So I think this is going to be really great. And I know our listeners are going to love it. So thank you.
Well, I want to congratulate both of you, Theresa and Kathryn, for the work that you're doing. If I understand right, this is about your 4th year. Is that right? In terms of podcasting? Yeah. So that's a lot of podcasts. That's a lot of people tuning in. And as I went through the list of topics, what I admire is that you're coming back to things again and again. So what my whole thing is, telling people once, that's all good. Coming back to it the second time, that's good too. Coming back to the third time a couple of months later, that's good too. So that's maybe my plug for, you might want to have me back again in maybe 6 or 8 months or something.
Yep, I like it.
Yeah, so congratulations to both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. If you have found value in our conversation, please hit that like button, subscribe to our podcast, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us grow our community of passionate music educators.